Welcome to Anne Flanagan with the Future of Privacy Forum. How are you, Anne?
Great to be here, Courtney. Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Very well. So, what areas of transportation do you expect AI to play a role in?
So we are a non-profit global organization that works with different stakeholders in public sector and the private sector to really maximize the opportunities and minimize the risks around technology. And we really look through the lens of data. And this obviously is an issue that we have been looking at for a number of years. We've had that hype bubble around generative AI over the last 2 years about. But FPF has been looking at privacy and AI generally since about 2015. And when we look at transportation, I think there's a tendency to think, oh, the AI hype cycle, we're looking at generative AI. When we really look at traditional AI and how it's used in transportation, it's used right across the board. Everything from automated decision making to robotics, and you really look at how that actually plays out. It could be safety systems in vehicles, it could be supply chain, it could be infrastructure development, cybersecurity, customer experience, right down to research and development itself. And it's a really exciting moment in time right now because AI has evolved to such a point that there is so much opportunity out there.
And you all focus on the ethics of this type of technology. So, what are some of the risks that you see in using AI in transportation?
Absolutely. I think it's really important when we look at the risks. Obviously, if you look at risks and only focus on risks, nobody will be able to innovate, nobody will be able to do anything. So I think the key is really to get that balance right between making sure that innovation is happening, but the risks around ethics and any kind of harms are really, really minimized. So what are those actual risks? When we start to look at how AI can potentially affect people, if we look at how that actually plays out in transportation, AI really starts with the data. And where does data come from? In a lot of cases, that's you and that's I. Obviously, it's coming from our vehicles and the different systems that we travel within and the different modes of transportation out there. But really, if you're trying to do something like, if you are a government and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to figure out traffic management? I want to know where drivers are driving. I want to know where vehicles are going on the road. But they don't need to know your name or my name in order to have that information. So really, it starts with minimizing the data, making sure that the right data is being inputted into systems. And then when you look at how that could actually harm people, it could be anything from violating privacy to a disproportionate representation of folks in the development of AI. One of the really, really important things about AI is that because it learns from data, if you look at large language models in particular in machine learning, they're learning from data. And if that data is biased and not representative of folks, we end up with innovations that are biased and not representative of folks. It could be something as simple as a seat in a vehicle may be built around, may have been developed by machine learning, may not be taking into account the proportions of you and I as women. Could be anything. Could also be how it is really represented in communities, and making sure that really when you're looking at the development of AI in transportation, that you're using data that is unbiased, that you're minimizing the data use, and that you're instilling checks and balances along the process as that AI is being developed and deployed.
And what sort of ethical considerations should developers have in mind from the beginning of having these technologies?
So I mentioned the data already. I think it's also important to think about, where does the human come into this? Because ultimately technology is to serve us in a society as people, and obviously serve companies around their innovation as well. And I always say that good innovation is sustainable innovation. The National Institute of Standards and Technology has a risk management framework that it has developed around AI. And in those recommendations, they really, really start with the data. They talk about tagging the data, mapping the data, and making sure that companies have governance processes in place around the development of those AI systems. I think a really good example here to look at is that if you are developing something, you want to make sure also that your employees in your company are on board with all of this. One of the things that we have done at the Future of Privacy Forum is that last year we launched a generative AI checklist that really serves as a checklist for companies that want to use AI tools in their environment. So there are a number of different tools out there, the NIST RMF that I mentioned, the generative AI checklist that we have, but really it starts with making sure that the data is properly taken care of and that there are impact assessments, auditing, testing throughout the development of that AI. If you're using a third-party AI system along the way, that you're using some sort of internal tool and internal checklist to make sure that you are deploying that in an ethical manner. so that ultimately the data is treated in such a way that you are really, really minimizing those harms.
What advice would you give to those who are developing these technologies in order to be more ethical?
That's a really great question. One of the things I'm very proud at a feature of Privacy Forum, and the name Forum is not an accident, we do bring people together, is really the importance of stakeholder gathering. And it's a pleasure to be here at ITS this week and see stakeholders from right across the United States really coming together, sharing ideas and sharing best practice and understanding what's out there. I think it really starts with that communication piece, understanding between the public sector and the private sector and different stakeholders what needs to happen, both at an individual level in companies and collectively across the industry to get to a more ethical outcome. I would say on a day-to-day basis, really understanding the development of AI systems and really understanding that it really starts with the data, and to have those checks and balances, the testing, the auditing, really, really careful deployment. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, considering the human, considering potential consequences for society. But for us, such as this, as we're here this week, really understanding and having those conversations about the different risks and the different ways to mitigate that risk is really, really great place to start for folks.
Dialogue between everybody.
Absolutely.
Well, Anne, thank you so much. Really interesting conversation.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Such a pleasure.